So my name is Matt. I'm the co-host of Wealth, Power, and Influence with Jason Stapleton. I've been doing that for I think about 3 years now. And then last year I kicked off my own show with another buddy of mine named Steven Messina, and we called the show KingPilled. And right now it's just a YouTube channel, and we're in the process of getting it to an actual audio podcast, but there's some stuff we've got to get figured out behind the scenes before we do that. So it's taken us way too long, and I'm sure people are getting tired of hearing me say that. But for now, you can find us on YouTube at KingPilled, and then you can follow me on Twitter at Real KingPilled. That's where I do the majority of my posting. So I did an interview with a guy named Michael Corbell on his podcast, the Invictus Mind podcast, a couple of days ago, and he said that he considers me a philosopher, and so I was like, okay, I guess you could consider me that. Someone who I don't really have any claim to fame or anything apart from the fact that I just think and talk and say stuff. And then lots of people seem to like what I say. So they get me to talk to other people. So
you talk very deeply, by the way. You are, to me, in my mind, when I think about you, I'm like, he sounds like he would be a philosopher, actually, because you go several layers deep on everything that you think about. And that's very much like a philosopher would. It's a nice contrast between you and Jason. I wouldn't say that. I don't think Jason goes quite as many levels deep on all of the issues as you do. So it's a really nice mix when you're listening to the show. Question about king-pilled. Okay, so is that like a reference to being red-pilled or blue-pilled or white-pilled or black-pilled? What does that mean?
Right. Yeah. This is supposed to kind of play off of that. It was, we were going to start our podcast, Stephen and I, and we were kind of like, oh, what are we going to call it? And for several years, I'd planned on starting a podcast, and I'd always try to think of what I would call it and what would it even be? What would my message be? And I kind of followed that train of thought through from, encountering libertarian thought and then getting deeper into it and then getting into the minarchist anarchist debate and then being completely persuaded of anarcho-capitalism and calling myself an ANCAP. And then it's like, but this trajectory has continued, this trend has continued. And to where now I got exposed to this guy, Mencius Moldbug, and I read Hoppe on monarchy versus democracy. And I started really seeing a lot of the merits or like the inevitability kind of something along the lines of monarchy, and then started seeing these symbolic patterns of the king role as an archetype arising through all different levels of the social strata. And so from that, we kind of, Stephen and I had been talking, and we were talking about like monarchy. When you kind of, at first it starts off as kind of a meme, like, yeah, we want a king, but then we're kind of like more seriously, like maybe we want a king. And then that just kind of naturally coming from a Christian background, that led me into starting to think a lot more about the blends between politics and religion and where they meet and how much of it is really the same thing. And so then you've got Jesus as the king of kings. And so from those things, those thoughts were kind of the things that we were bantering around and talking about. And so one day as I was talking to him, I said, I can't remember who we were talking about, but I was like, man, we need to king-pill these mofos. And he was like, there you go. There's the title, king-pilled. So
nice.
That's kind of the gist of it. I guess if you wanted to have a praxis of what it means to be king-pilled, it's basically taking ownership of your life and acting like you are the king of your own life. You're the king of your own lifestyle. And the thing about a king is that everybody focuses on the power that a king has, but power is really responsibility. And the king is not just the one who has all the power, he's the one who has all the responsibility. If things go wrong, everyone knows who to blame. The king is responsible for it, and it's going to be his head that's going to be taken off. I've joked before that the only difference between monarchy and anarchy is a single bullet. So that's kind of how I got to that point. And so I think that the praxis of being king-pilled is that you don't concern yourself about the big workings. You don't get yourself involved in politics until you've taken complete control of your own life and you've established yourself, controlled the source of your income. You've created a family. You've established yourself as someone who's responsible and capable and is taking ownership of your own life. And then kind of a natural consequence of that is that you'll be rewarded with more responsibility. With that more responsibility comes more authority. And then that trajectory, that trend takes you in the direction of the ultimate monarch. So that would be the praxis of what it means to be king-pilled.
So you think that that's the best way to go about actually, if we were going to fix society, whatever that means, if we were going to solve the problems going on, that it would be each individual being king-pilled, cleaning their own room, maybe if you wanted to say it like that, that's a better way to solve it than, say, trying to figure out whether or not who's going to vote for what bill that's in Congress and all of that. That's just not a way to go for it.
Right. That's the putting the cart before the horse. You know, if you're going to start engaging in the political process, it should be not because you're trying to spread a message, because that's not what politics is for. Politics isn't the arena for spreading messages. Politics is the arena for people who already believe in a message coming together and working together to take power in some sense, either at the micro scale or the macro scale. So if you're going to get involved in the political process, it should be because you have a mission. You have a specific thing you're trying to accomplish. You know, you have a specific bill that you're trying to get through because you have a specific piece of technology that's going to liberate people from some sort of bondage, or, you know, something like that. Like you should be getting involved in the political process in a pragmatic sense, because ultimately the process itself doesn't care about liberties. It's not a process that's going to be used to enhance liberty or anything like that. You're not going to ever actually accomplish that through the political system. The political system is just a tool that you might be able to take advantage of in various specific circumstances to accomplish your broader goal, which should be above and beyond politics.
And so you mentioned being in ANCAP. We're also talking about the political system right now. Do you think that there is a hope for a political system that could be beneficial, or does it just need to not exist?
Well, so I think that it's inevitable. I think that there's going to be one.
Yeah.
There's going to be a political system, and that political system is not going to be, it's not going to be controlled by people who value liberty, because people who value liberty go out of their way to not control the system. So that's kind of an inevitability. That's like a shortcoming, I think, of the message of liberty as it is currently constructed. And that's part of my goal, is to try to get people to think about liberty more practically or more pragmatically, and recognize that liberty isn't something that, it's not like you can just make really good arguments and magically liberty is going to arise. Liberty is something that has to be created, and then it has to be protected and sustained. And it's protected and sustained through institutions. And so then ultimately those institutions have power. The people within those institutions have power because of it. And you kind of get back to your exact same problem again. So what I would say in answer to the question is that there's going inevitably to be a government, a state, some sort of a system that wields and weaponizes power. And I want the people within that system who are most influential within it to be liberty minded, because that will make the best system. But you have to realize where the actual source of the state comes from, and it's not within the realms of politics. That's window dressings. The actual meat of the state, the actual the gears where everything is actually turning is much deeper, at much deeper layers than what we actually see on the surface. It's within institutions, organizations, the people that control the narrative. So you get the press, you get the academy, you get right now it's science. Science is really they're using science as like a new priesthood. So the majority of people are just going to follow along with whatever seems most powerful, because people are drawn to power. So if you want to influence that, then you have to influence the mechanics behind the machine of power. And then the politics is going to take care of itself.
Do you think that people always are going to find something to worship, something that's going to be like a religion? You were just mentioning science and the media and all of that. And we had a conversation with the president of an organization called Atheists for Liberty, and we were talking about how government was really becoming the new religion for people. Do you think that's just something that's always going to happen? And is it better when it is actual religion, say Christianity, that is taking up that need for people than if it were government?
Yeah, the question isn't if religion, it's what religion. There's always going to be a religion, because religion is a fundamental constituent of the human psyche. Religion is the way that the human being engages with its highest ultimate value. whatever is the moral direction that you're appointed, that's your religion, and you'll engage with it religiously. This is actually kind of ironically, this kind of general principle was illustrated by a mathematician named Gödel in what's called the Incompleteness Theorems. And I'm not a mathematician. I can't actually understand it. I just understand what people tell me it said. But basically what he used set theory to demonstrate that that every system requires another system outside that system to explain it. And so he did this as a response to the people at the time, the positivists, who wanted to say that you could prove all of reality using like math and logic, and that it was, in essence, we didn't need God anymore. It's like, we don't need God anymore. We found math and logic, and that's all that we need. And we can explain everything through that. And so what he did is he actually used math and logic, roughly speaking, to demonstrate that that's not true. Like, ultimately, logic has to have a logic. And that logic, by definition, isn't logic. By definition, it's going to be illogic. So logic rests upon on illogic. And in the same sense, science rests upon faith. Ultimately, every single scientist, no matter how non-religious he thinks he is, has religious beliefs that he can't prove. They're axioms that he just takes on faith. He just assumes them, and then he builds the rest of his worldview on top of it. So then, in answer to the second part of your question, I would say yes. If religion is going to be inevitable, then the question isn't how unreligious can we be or something like that, but rather it should be, what is the best religion? What is the religion that's the most coherent, that's the most adaptive, that yields the best outcomes, that gives the best description of reality? You know, these are all different things that you could evaluate. And then that changes kind of the fundamental basis of the conversation. So now you're doing comparative religion rather than apologetics for, atheism versus non-atheism.
Yeah. There's also been something, so, we've been talking back and forth for a couple of years, but we haven't actually talked that much. And there was something I was wanting to ask you about, and it had to do about the change in direction of the show, of Jason Stapleton program to Wealth, Power, and Influence, the idea behind that. Now, well, let's keep in mind, and I want you to be totally honest about this, I have a podcast called Good Morning Liberty, and we may or may not spend a lot of time complaining about things in politics quite a bit. Okay, and now we talk about how you could actually solve these problems, or what you should do in your life to actually solve these problems. But I wanted to get in a little bit deeper with whether or not you think there's a value in the activism to talking about all of these different political problems, or if it really just needs to be focused in on you getting your life in order, and that's going to be the way that you solve everything.
I think that I don't have a problem with people doing it as like a means of entertainment. And ultimately, I don't have a problem with it in general. You specifically or someone in general could do whatever you want. I don't. What I'm going to evaluate is, what are your goals? And then based on that, what is what you're doing now doing for you in terms of reaching your goals? So if your goal is to be completely free of the state, then this is a thing I encountered as calling myself an anarchist. Is I say that I don't believe in the state, and I have a goal where one day I and everyone I care about will be free from the state. But now the title that I've given myself defines me in relation to this thing that I claim to want to be free of. So if I was free of that thing, then how would I define myself? What am I now? There is no state. So am I still an anarchist? Or am I now something else? So this same atheism runs in this kind of the same thing, where it's like, you've now defined yourself as being against some. So in a sense, your very existence is bound up in that thing that you claim to oppose. So the next question I ask myself is, okay, well, if there was no state, what would I be doing? What would my goal, what would my focus be if it wasn't here? And the next question after that is, why am I not doing that now? Or can I do that now? Or is there a way to blend both of them? So for you, there's a difference between you and your listeners. So for you specifically, you're someone who is is you're different than your listeners, because you're someone who has a podcast, who has a large audience, who has who's made himself successful through what you're doing. You are taking control of the source of your income. You are establishing yourself and developing wealth, power, and influence. This is separate from necessarily the system itself. Yeah. So if the regime was to collapse, if all of a sudden we were to be ushered into Ancapistan tomorrow, it's not like suddenly you would be without like, oh, what's the point of my show anymore? You would be able to naturally transition into something else that's relevant. So for you specifically, I don't think there's anything inconsistent or hypocritical or anything like that about what you're doing. Now, people who are listening to you, if they aren't simultaneously putting themselves in the position to be the same way, if they're coming and listening to you for the sake of yeah, screw those guys, they're the reason that I'm down, as I'm going to go to my 9-to-5 job and just complain about my boss and whatever else and go back home and complain that I'm not getting anywhere. Those would be the people that I would say you are, there's an inconsistency between what you claim you value and what you actually value. You claim that you value liberty, but you're not actually engaged in the process of creating it for yourself. You're just waiting for somebody else to give it to you, and nobody is ever going to give it to you.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, that's really, really what I was wondering there, because when I heard you guys first talk about it, the thing that I was thinking, now my goal is to actually change. I want to actually change things. So my goal is not just to have a successful podcast where I can be good and I can have my own wealth, power, and influence. The goal is to actually change. And when it comes to the value of, say, doing both of these things, I think that these two things work really well together, where you need to be able to identify what the problems are, why the solutions that people are coming up with wouldn't work, why there are better ways to do this, because you could convince someone to gain their own wealth, power, and influence, and then they could take that and they could use it for really terrible things and try to help grow the state, or they could try to take liberties away from other people if they don't also have that background of why are all these things wrong, why haven't they worked in the past, what's actually the best thing for the most amount of people. And so I really always thought that they could go hand in hand. Maybe there's a step-by-step process, like, okay, this isn't the way to do it, and then you graduate on to gaining your wealth, power, and influence after that,
Right. So I said maybe a year and a half ago or something like that, I remember we did an episode about the Liberty Movement and our kind of our vision of what the future of the Liberty Movement was. And I said at the time that it's no longer in politics. That's dead and gone and over with. And the future of the Liberty Movement today is in three things. It's in business, education, and entertainment. And the latter two are subsets of the former. So education and entertainment are just subsets of business. So ultimately, if your goal is to spread liberty, then you need to be in business of some kind, because once you go into business for yourself, you're now accumulating the means by which liberty can be spread. So if you're wanting to change something through the political system, it's not impossible. It's not that you can't change anything. It's that you're not going to change everything. So you can move stuff around the edges. And sometimes moving stuff around the edges, that has a tangible effect on someone's life. That actually changes someone's life in real life. When you say like the legalization of weed, and the fact that now there are people who won't be locked in a cage because they were carrying a plant. Mm-hmm. That's a tangible win for that person. That person is now going to have a better life because of the legalization of weed. Now, the legalization of weed also now creates a whole new avenue of massive revenue generation for the state. So you on a micro level, you may have given liberty to someone, but on a macro level, the state just became more wealthy and powerful. So that's why I'm saying that if you're wanting to actually change the system from the inside out and fundamentally completely change the paradigm, you're not going to do that working through the political system. You're going to have to do it by creating a parallel political system, in essence, that eventually is so appealing and so effective and so powerful that people just naturally they're examining the market and they're like, okay, I want statecraft services. Who's going to offer me the best statecraft services? There's this bloated, old, incompetent, bureaucratic, corrupt regime that is run by a bunch of retarded boomers, and they can't, it's the worst thing ever. Or there's this new, hip, awesome, hopping thing with that's full of new technology and whatever. Whatever the system is, if people on the market have just the existing state to choose from, they're going to keep choosing it until they get an alternative. So if you create that alternative, then they'll choose it. That's the base level that I'm trying to get people focused on. Not how can we work within the system to change it, but ultimately, how can we fundamentally replace the system with something completely different? So to do that, you need institutions. Your podcast is an institution. Your podcast is something that is available to be networked with other institutions to become the scaffolding for the change. Mm-hmm. So it's good to have people. There was this is a kind of a controversial take, but Nick Sarwark and Dave Smith did a big debate. I think it was the Soho Forum a few years ago.
Yeah.
And when I listened to that, I want to make it abundantly clear that I have zero respect for Nick Sarwark. I think that I would not hesitate to tell him to his face. I think he's a terrible person, but I think that he was right when he talked to Dave. He said, he told Dave that he said, my job is not, I can't remember exactly how he phrased it, but he basically said, it's not my job within a political party to spread liberty. My job is to accumulate votes because that's what a political party is for. He said, your job is to evangelize people. You have a podcast. Your job is to do the evangelism. It's my job to accumulate votes. And I think he's exactly correct. That's why he's such a good politician, because he knows how the game of politics works. That's why I don't have any respect for him, but he's right in that sense. So what happens is that through business, education, entertainment, through cultural mediums, people are informed and educated and directed toward the right paths of thinking. But then there has to be institutions that are there for them to turn to. So I did a debate with Angela McArdle that just released, I think today, on Lines of Liberty. And a large part of the debate, I was asking her, she's like, okay, we're going to get these people in office. We're going to do this thing, that thing. And I said, okay, so then what? What's the plan? Get liberty-minded people elected. And then what's next? And I don't think I ever got an answer from her, not one that satisfied me, at least, of what's next. What is the plan? Just getting liberty-minded people elected it's not sufficient, because the system directs the people who are elected. It doesn't respond to them. So what's the next plan beyond that?
I think what people also in the Libertarian Party need to realize is that any libertarians who get elected, they're going to be destroyed by the media. Like, you think that what happened to Trump was bad. I think he was treated, we can say all kinds of bad stuff about Trump. I think he was treated unfairly by the media. But whenever you get someone up there who actually wants to get rid of taxes or get rid of the welfare state or anything like that, they are going to see a level of vitriol from the media that we've never seen before. And I think a lot of libertarians don't realize that. They're like, well, we need to get on the debate stage and that'll fix everything. And I'm just like, they will absolutely destroy you. You think that you're not hated like Trump and Biden or Trump and Clinton. You're not hated because no one cares about you. That's why you're not hated yet. But as soon as you get out there and you're pushing policies of having no taxation or getting rid of Medicare or something like that, they'll destroy you in ways that we've never seen before. I think people really aren't looking at that fact yet, that's going to happen.
That's absolutely correct. And I think it even goes beyond that, because a lot of people will hear what you just said and they'll say, oh, well, that's fine. I'm willing to martyr myself for the cause. But there's a buddy of mine who has been making waves lately with his concept he introduced of archotropism. His name's Popular Liberty, and he's been giving talks on this concept he conceived called archotropism, which is basically the way that it's the way the state grows its own power is the easiest way to understand it. And it's counterintuitive. It's not what you would expect. And he uses the laws of thermodynamics to illustrate it. So for example, one of the principles that he has derived from his application of his laws of archotropism is that Lysander Spooner said that he has this famous quote about how whether the Constitution authorized the government that we have today or was powerless to prevent it. In either case, it's unfit to exist. And he said that's actually not entirely accurate. The Constitution was actually very, very effective at constraining the government, at holding the government back and restraining its power. But what he did is he compared it to interest rates. What the Constitution did effectively is it placed a very high interest rate on the use of power. So now the state is incentivized not to spend power, but to save it. When you have a really high interest rate, you're incentivized to save. So you save and you build up a whole bunch. And so what the Constitution did is it actually made the government massive and powerful, because this is the nature of how power works. This is the nature of how the state expands itself. So another principle that you can derive from archetropism is that the state needs chaos in order to create an opportunity for it to provide order. This is why the state and the organized crime always wind up working together, because they need each other. Organized crime needs the state to create a black market so that they can take over that black market. The state needs organized crime to create a pretext for the state to exist. Because look, all these bad guys are going to get you if we aren't here. So when you as a libertarian get onto the debate stage and you start championing all this talk of freedom and everything, the way it's going to be framed is, look, we told you that those boogeymen are out there. Here's one himself. He's brave enough to even come onto our stage and talk all of his white supremacist hate speech here. Here's why you need to understand that libertarians are domestic terrorists, and they're coming to get you. They're coming to take away your precious institutions that provide all of the good things to you. We're the ones who protect you and sustain you. And look, here's this big bad guy who's going to come get you. If we weren't here, we just gave you a peek. Like, we bravely allowed him here so you could see we're not lying to you. These boogeymen actually exist and they're coming to get you. So what you've done is you've just played directly into their charade. You've played directly into their scheme. They have to have opponents to sustain their own power. So they'll create their own opposition if they need to. And when libertarians go get into the political ring and start spitting that hot liberty fire, the way that is framed is, there you go. You've just volunteered to be our opposition. You've volunteered to be the mechanism by which we expand our power. This is just the nature of, I'm not advocating that it be this way. I'm describing that this is how the political system works. This is the role that democracy is supposed to play in expanding the bureaucratic state.
So the more opposition there is to the state, the more power the state ends up having. It actually sounds a lot. For some reason, this does remind me of like the slime from Ghostbusters 2. Like the more anger there is, right? It just keeps growing, feeding off of all the negative energy. And so, when I hear you talking like this, it's not exactly uplifting to think about, because I'm like, oh God, there's no way to fix this actually whatsoever, except for this KingPilled mentality. That might actually be the only way to fix it. But other than that, are there actual ways to decrease the state?
You could let it, you basically have to let it kill itself off.
Okay.
That's if you think about where the state comes from in the first place, it's people banding together to try to attack a common enemy. And you can get into like mimetic, like Girard's mimetic theory to really understand this and the role of sacrifice and all that kind of stuff. But that's going deep. The fact of it is that the state is a group of people who've banded together against a common enemy. And now that organization has been taken over by opportunistic, wealthy, powerful people who will create common enemies so that they can weaponize this system. And it's been perfected. This art has been perfected over the course of a few hundred years. So if you want to get rid of the state, you have to stop giving it an enemy. Now it's going to keep creating its own enemies, which is why you basically just have to wait it out. And it may be that it doesn't collapse in your lifetime. And so then you have to come to grips with that. You have to come to grips with the fact that you're never going to see Ancapistan. That's not realistic. It's a utopia by definition. You're never going to get to it. So instead, you have to make the most of what you do have. You have to make the most of what is in front of you. And this is where I started realizing, it's kind of back to the thing with anarchy and and not wanting to, just starting to get really uncomfortable with identifying myself with respect to the state. I was like, how do I identify myself outside of the state? And I think that there's a real danger when you associate, I don't mean you specifically, just in general, when you associate liberty as something that's inherently bound up in the state. When that happens, it's kind of like you don't ever let the state disappear. It's constantly always there. And then in fact, eventually what would happen is that the goal to prevent a state from arising would itself become a state. So this is where it's inevitable that there's going to be some sort of a state organization. So then to me, this is actually becomes very freeing, because now I don't have to fight the state. I don't have to try to get rid of it. I don't have to play this game of whack-a-mole. I mean, that would require a level of wealth and power unfathomable that nobody has ever had. Nobody has the wealth and power to play that game of whack-a-mole endlessly. So you don't have to play that game. Instead, you get to make your own life as the best you possibly can. With what resources you have in front of you, you have the power to make the best of your situation. And then you can unite with other people who are like-minded, and you can create a community of people who are making the best out of their situation. And then that community of people can begin to work together toward a common goal. And what history has shown us is that it's never the majority that directs and moves a society. The phrase that Nassim Taleb used was the intolerant minority. Society always moves itself around the minority of people that say, we will not be moved. The people who put themselves in a position to be unmovable. Or as Michael Corbell, his Invictus, the unconquerable man. An example of this would be, it's not exactly, it's just a parallel, just kind of to illustrate it, would be kosher food. So a small percentage of the people eat kosher. Relative to the population, it's a very, very small percent. But like anything that's kosher will be marked as kosher for everybody, because the majority of people don't care. It doesn't make any difference to them one way or the other. A minority of people care, and they care a tremendous amount. They will not participate. They will not purchase your product if they don't know that it's kosher. So that small minority directs the behavior for everybody else. That principle can be really, really powerful, because ultimately it's the elites, the ruling class, whatever you want to call it, the state, the powers that be. It's always a minority of people. It's a few thousand people globally who control everything else. They're the 1% of the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. What that should tell you then is that if you want to control more of your environment to ensure the liberty of yourself and the people that you care about, there is a formula for that. There's a path that you can walk that will take you in that direction. But it requires responsibility, and it requires sacrifice. And this is where as I got to where I was realizing that politics and religion were kind of blending themselves together, I realized how powerful the Christian message in particular is here. And the role of taking up your cross daily, or taking responsibility for your life and then bearing that. What you find is that when you take responsibility for things, when you take responsibility for your own life, the universe has a way of rewarding you for that. You find that the more that you take responsibility for, the more becomes available to you, the more opportunities you get. The more that you embrace those opportunities, the better you become at fulfilling your responsibilities, and the more opportunities that you get. So there's this natural positive feedback loop that happens. And so some people will call that the universe. Some people might call that God. Some people might say that this is when you obey when you follow the will of God and you allow yourself to be embodied by Christ, then God rewards you because you are now in alignment with him. And this is the natural consequence of being in alignment with God, is that you get the rewards that are associated with being in alignment with God. So you could think of that on like a metaphor level. And I think that's kind of what people end up doing, is they get uncomfortable with the idea of God. So they take all of the components of that and just port it over and say it's the universe, that does it, or it's just cause and effect, or it's the laws of science or the laws of physics or whatever. Ultimately, you're looking at the same phenomenon. And what that tells you is that if you take the initiative if you take control of your own life, you say, it's my fault, I'm responsible for where I am, and I'm the one who controls where I'm going, then there's a natural structure to the universe, to reality, that will reward you for that. And you will increase, you'll get better and better. And that's the path to liberty.
You know, what's interesting is if you take this and then you apply it to government as the God or the religion, and you think about aligning yourself with that philosophy, and how would you be rewarded inside of that reality? And what would you need to do to be rewarded for that? Is it really taking your own responsibility or not? It's obviously not taking responsibility. But it is interesting when you align that with Christianity and then you align it with government, which incentive structure pattern you create.
Right. And this is where, to use a verse from the Bible, Jesus said that no man can serve two masters. What's interesting from that is that the implication there is that you serve a master. And I think technically this is true. I think that you are born enslaved to a master. And the question is that master going to be the prince of this world? Or you can consider that the forces of darkness, evil, powers and principalities. There's all different kinds of words for it. But you can be enslaved to that, and you can do the will of that. And I think that's what the state would be. The state would be the primary tool of the forces of evil. And you can be born enslaved to that, or you can be enslaved to your maker. You can be enslaved to the universe. Dave Asprey, the bulletproof guy, he likes to say that he has this mantra that he repeats, which says that something like the universe is conspiring to work in my favor, or something like that. It's just you set your mind to believing that things are going to work out, and that there's a conspiracy to ensure that the universe works in my favor, or something like that. And when you believe that, if you repeat that mantra to yourself, eventually you'll come to believe it. It's the same kind of principle, that if you get to choose who your master is going to be, you're never going to be free. You aren't born like an empty blank slate that's just free to do whatever you want. When you're born, before you even become aware of yourself, you've already been enculturated into a specific community. The world has happened to you before you were aware of it to happen back. So you've already been imprinted upon by the world around you. You have a limited selection of opportunities in front of you. You can't do literally you don't have infinite opportunities. Outside forces have constrained those opportunities for you. So you have a limited set. Right away now, the whole idea of, free will, I'm free, I can free to do whatever I want. Just by definition, you're not. So that's like not a very useful model for looking at the world. What you are is you're free to choose from a set that's been limited for you, and you can choose your opportunities within that. So then in a sense, you can think of this as like, all right, well, some outside force limited my opportunities. So I'm beholden to something else. I'm naturally beholden to something else. So now am I going to be beholden to the forces of darkness or the forces of light? And that is when you begin saying, okay, well, the way that I act is going to define who I am. So I'm going to act in a manner that is taking responsibility and taking initiative and making myself unconquerable, making myself the best person that I can be, the most powerful, the most wealthy, the most influential, the most dependable, the most consistent, most reliable, whatever one you want to focus on. When you do that, you now align yourself with positivity. You align yourself with the upward trajectory. And if you begin focusing on that, like Jordan Peterson says, clean your room. Don't try to reset the entire world. Just clean your room. Take care of what's immediately in front of you, and then begin building on top of that. And ultimately, I think that Jordan Peterson talks about the dominance hierarchy. That's your king. Your king is the guy who is the best at that. Mm-hmm. Your king is the guy who's put himself in that position through his life, through the way that he's lived. So the king isn't an oppressor. He could function as an oppressor, but then, obviously we function under oppressors now. So, it's just a different kind of oppressor. But the king, rightly treated, is the man who has proven himself the best by being the most responsible, the most accountable, the most reliable, the most consistent. He's the guy who naturally finds himself in that position. And then we can choose whether we're going to embody his spirit or fight against it and create our own. You could do that as well. But again, there's just natural consequences to each thing that you do. So you can just look at it and say, okay, well, if I do this, it doesn't matter what my intentions are. Here's what the actual consequences are. So rather than say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, don't judge yourself on your intentions, judge yourself on your actual outcomes, judge yourself on what actually happens when you do that thing.
Well, I really like the idea of deciding that, going back to a few minutes ago, the universe was aligned in your favor, taking that responsibility. Because if you play out the two different options and you say, well, I'm going to act as if I'm going to take all the opportunities that I can, and you know, things are going to go well for me. And let's say that you're going to take that path, or then you take the other path where you don't take any opportunities because you're scared and you think everything's going to go poorly. You're going to end up creating your own destiny when you do that.
Yes.
And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize, especially when they get into business. They don't take as many opportunities as you can. I mean, this more surface level stuff, even networking with people, like opportunities of talking to people. You don't realize how many doors that opens up to lead to other doors. That's why we went to Freedom Fest a few weeks ago. You know, we want to meet. We wanted to interview Dave Rubin and talk to him and meet with all these different people who are doing the things right inside of our space. And then you get that one thing that opens up another opportunity, and you take that one up, and then hopefully you just keep moving up to this, whatever your goal is in life and ours. I mean, we just want to be we just want to change the world. That's it. It's a small goal, but I guess I do need to think about cleaning my room first because it's a mess in here. I'll say that.
Well, the way you can think about it is that you cleaning your room is changing the world.
Yeah.
Because now the world is different than it was before. Mm-hmm. Now the world is the world that it was, plus your room is cleaned. And so you are engaged in the process of changing the world, even when you're just operating on the micro level.
Yeah.
I have to say, Dave Rubin is one of the nicest people I've ever met. He's a really, really good guy. And it's cool to see, even if he is his whole PragerU personality is funny. Yeah. It's so ironic. It's funny, but he's such a genuinely good, kind person. And it's really good to see people from within our community starting to rub shoulders with him a lot more and be connected with that. Cause like you said, that network, as that network grows, then this community develops more influence. It begins to influence the things outside of it. Mm-hmm. I would want to clear up one thing is I realized that I use the word wealth, and a lot of people think that means money. And wealth can include money, but just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean that you're wealthy. And ultimately, I started describing this to someone before, as I said that you can build your wealth in two directions. You can build your wealth horizontally, or you can build your wealth vertically. And then this is where you get the really super cheesy, like Tony Robbins entrepreneur phrase, where it's you can either grow your net worth or you can grow your network. But that idea, though, the idea that you can build wealth by accumulating for yourself lots and lots of money. Mm-hmm. And if you aren't at the same time accumulating a lot of debt, then that may be a great way to increase your wealth. But you don't have to be someone who's capable of generating tons and tons of dollars for yourself to also be able to make yourself wealthy with the community or the network that you're a part of, where you join forces with people networked with you. Libertarians like to consider themselves individualists, and I'm obviously all my sacred cows are all getting slaughtered. So I'm starting to question the individualist versus collectivist thing too. But I think it's a false dichotomy. But ultimately, I think everyone can agree that humans are naturally tribalist. Mm-hmm. And they naturally identify with a tribe. This is part of when you're born, you're born with a constrained set of options ahead of you. Part of that is that you are born into relationships. So you're born with an identity. Your identity is literally in your name. Your last name says that I am the son of these people. So you're first of all, you're defined by these relationships. Excuse me. And then you have your brothers and sisters. You have nieces, nephews, grandmas, grandpas. You're defined by your tribe from the beginning. So much so, this is so embedded in people that even the desire to eliminate tribalism is a tribal desire. You get a tribe of people who want to eliminate tribalism. So tribalism is inherent to the human species. In the modern age, this is a kind of a downside of things like individualist thought and capitalism. This is a downside of some of these things is that they have created atomized humans who are obsessed with the material world and have lost sight of the mystical world that is out there, the abstract things that connect us. And those, just even though they're abstract, they're very, very real. And as we've progressed through, I'm trying to think of how to do this concisely, as we've progressed through the rise of technology, and the technology has started kind of driving us apart, our families, friends, everything. There's a lot of our interactions are much less personal. I think it's becoming more and more essential that we really prioritize and seek out communities and try to create communities, because our health, like our health on a personal level and on a societal level, depends upon us having strong communities. Those bonds have been broken down a lot by a lot of different forces. And it's good to see them starting to build back up. People, I think, are starting to sense this and are naturally seeking out networks and communities and tribes. And as we go through the coming collapse, I think the people that survive the best are going to be the people who have the strongest tribal bonds.
Well, tell me, I know that you guys are working on a new project right along these lines. So tell me what's going on with that.
Yeah. So we created a network. Jason created a network, and we've just been helping him with it, called the Nomad Network. And the idea is that he wrote the book, the Nomadic Wealth Formula, which is based on the idea that you need to, number one, control the source of your income, and then you need to make that income mobile. This is really true freedom, is being able to control the resources that come into you, and then control where you can go, where you can take that. That's tangential to the government. You can determine that for yourself, no matter what the government is. And so that's the nomadic wealth formula. So then he created this network called the Nomad Network that is for people who buy into that idea, for people who value that, and for people who want to make themselves nomadically wealthy, or nomads, who want to unite, connect with other people who are thinking the same way, believe the same way, and begin to start creating these bonds that are so it's not just for your own edification on the network. There's lots and lots of training and advice and a great community of people who will give you help, give you tips. We've got a bunch of it's like a hive mind of people with different skills. So it's good for that. But then ultimately, our goal with it is that this is a place that people can go to be sustained, that they can go to get help if they lost a job, or they can meet with people, they can connect with you, move to a new city. Hey, I've just moved to such and such a city. You got someone else on the network. Hey, I live here. We can connect. And we have this tie that binds us. Going forward, Jason has some visions of a way that he wants to basically turn the app into kind of a collective where people can actually get paid through application of some type of cryptocurrency or something based upon their investment and involvement in the network. Ultimately, we want the network not to be just about us. We want it to be about the people who are on the network. So if you'd like to join, you can go to, I think mynomad.network is the best website to get to it right now. And you can get, actually, you know what? If you have a place, I'll send you a link, because there's a specific link where you can get a free month. We're right in the process of rolling out a brand new app. We've got a custom app. It'll be on the App Store. And I think within about a month or so, we'll have that rolled out, and that'll be fantastic. So if you're interested, I'll just say this. If you're interested, if you want to join, then just shoot me an email, matt@jasonstapleton.com. I'll get you the link to be able to get the free month. Because this new app that we have will be, it'll be free. There'll be a free segment of it that people can come on and join it for free. So far, it's $20 a month normally to get on, because we had to charge people to be able to actually sustain the app before. Yeah. But it'll be better now. So we'll have a free section. And so that's our goal. Our goal is we're pouring everything into building this community out, because I think that it's going to sustain people through the coming collapse. There's going to be people who will survive because of connections and skills that they've found on that app. And that's our goal. So that's the community we're building. That's what we're working on.
You guys have a community with it. I mean, it's got a lot of successful people in it, right? I mean, people have started some great businesses.
Right. There's people there that are doing over $1 million a month in revenue. Some people, there's people that are at all levels, people who have just started, who don't even have a business, who are just interested in being around that community. We've got people at all different levels. And so that's what's great, is that everybody can they're all different stages, all different levels, and they can communicate and connect with each other and help support and sustain each other.
Awesome. Well, Matt, I got to tell everyone, if you're not watching the video, I had to say congrats on the beard and the hair, because man, are you doing a good job. I need to go shave all this joke off of my face right now that's happening. But geez, it is just impressive. I recommend everyone find KingPilled on YouTube so you can see what is happening right now, because it'll make you, I mean, it might make you feel bad about yourself, I guess. I'm not really sure. It just depends on whether or not you wish you could grow this type of mane that this guy has right here, but it's good. It's good. So congrats on that, man.
I appreciate that.
All right.
We're actually going to be doing KingPilled live this afternoon. So if you want to go subscribe to our YouTube channel, KingPilled, we don't even have an image for it. It's just like the default K that's there. That's how you know it's the right one. And we'll be going live about 1:30 Pacific time today.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna let you go, man. I really appreciate your time. That was a really, really great conversation, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. It's an honor.